exposition, I got a bit of technical problems and also missed my binding here. But let's see if this works for the 10 minutes. So today I would like to present Marlowe, which is a domain-specific language for smart contracts in the top of cryptocurrencies. And it's domain-specific because it's specific to financial contracts, and also because it's not a general-purpose language. It's not Turing-complete, for example. And it is implemented as a series of Haskell data types. And it is strongly inspired by this paper. But the context is a bit different in that, for example, we cannot expect, we don't have only to describe what is supposed to happen, but we also have to enforce it. So we cannot, for example, rely on the court to enforce that the payment is done. We have to first allocate money, and then we can decide how to distribute it, but we cannot just expect payments to happen. So why do we care about the domain-specific language if we have general-purpose programming languages for smart contracts as well? And it turns out there are several advantages to having a domain-specific language. It is quite simpler to use, so we can expect even non-programmers to use them, and it's also, and even for programmers, there is things we can do that we couldn't do with a general-purpose language, like, for example, automatic proof, which, as you know, many of the proofs for general programs are undecidable. The automatic proofs cannot terminate. And for Marlowe, we can actually prove things automatically. Also, because we are talking about contracts, we need to consider that the users need an interface. And that would require, in general purpose languages, it would require to write a separate program and these two programs to communicate. So we have to be careful about they cooperating correctly, and this is a source of problems as well. But if we have a very specific language which talks about the possibilities, we can almost automatically infer a human interface, as I will show later. And also we can make sure that it's difficult to make mistakes because we make everything explicit. I'm going to skip this. The semantics of Marlowe are very simple, and they are defined as a function with this signature, exactly. So it basically just updates a contract with its state, and it also takes inputs that represent the things that the users say to the contract, the payments that they make, the choices that they make. And we have OS, which represents the information that comes from the outside. What I should say is that all this must be reproducible because it's a distributed system, and everybody must know what's going to happen with the contract, and they must agree in the outcome. So everything must be recorded in the blockchain. And so this information from outside we represent with this OS. And I would like to use the rest of the talk through the rest of the talk, I would like to use this graphical user interface that we have created for Meadow to make it even more accessible. So let me just give a small example contract that we can work with, and then we will see a demo in this tool. So the example is considers this promise. If we imagine that Bob was to teach Alice to save money, for example, and he says, okay, if you are able to save this amount of money, 100 ADA, for this amount of time, which would be 100 blocks in the blockchain, then I will reward you with 20 ADA. And we can very easily write a Marlowe contract that ensures that Bob keeps his promise. And it would look like this. Where's my mouse? Can you see fine in the back? Can you make a bit bigger? So this is Meadow. You can access it online. It's available in this URL, which I will show later. It basically uses the library Blockly for allowing you to create the contracts with puzzle blocks, which are self-described. So it's easier to know what's going to do. And on the right side, we have the actual Marlowe contract, which is just a Haskell term. Here we can see the different types of blocks we have. The main blocks are contracts, and these are just data type with a constructor and some parameters. And we can also use this to simulate the execution, how the execution would be when deployed in the blockchain. So here we have the parts of the signature that I showed you before. So this is the current block number, which will increase with time. We can see the state of the contract, the input, the output, and here we can see how the tool is actually deducing which potential actions the users can carry. So most of the things just can be done by choosing one element on the list. So let's go through this example. Here, Alice would be number one, participant number one, and Bob would be participant number two. So here the contract says that Alice is allowed to commit 100 ADA to the contract, to give the contract this money. And here we have precisely this option. So we can do that. And then we can increase the block number. We can imagine that the blocks are coming, so the contract evolves and it becomes smaller. Now there are less requirements to the contract. So we can see that now it's Bob's turn to put 20 ADA into the contract. And then we reach this when construct, which has two different alternatives. One is that Alice makes a choice, and the other alternative is that the block 100 is reached. So we could keep increasing the blocks. This is in case Alice wants to withdraw from this promise. So we say, I don't want to save, so I just give me the money back. And that would be done by making this choice. And if Alice manages to wait to block 100, then the one will continue it into this payment, so that Alice now has the ability to collect the 20 ADA. And once collected, we have this redeem construct, which returns every money that's committed to the contract but not paid to anybody. It can be redeemed by the original participants. And one last thing is, no, I should stop. So there is a Haskell. You can also use the Haskell embedding here, but I will not go into it because there is no time. So that's everything. Thank you for your attention.
Cool. I think we've got time for